The Weathered Tree. In the Sawtooth Mountains of Idaho, there is a windswept granite rock outcropping overlooking a beautiful valley. A solitary ponderosa pine tree grows in a crack of this cliff. Below her, in contrast, there is a valley forest. The tree lives in the most difficult spot of all the forest. To look at it, it appears there's too little soil for the tree to have begun life there. Once life began, it looks as if there would be too little water to sustain it. And even if its life were possible, the wind never stops blowing at the place, pushing the tree in one direction, then another, never stopping. The tree has been buffeted and blown relentlessly throughout her difficult life. A forest grew in the sheltered valley below this granite cliff. In the forest, there is rich and fertile ground for trees, which stores water from the snows of winter and the rain of the spring. Trees are sheltered by the valley and by each other from the winds which blow. The forest trees grew straight, tall, and in perfect symmetry. The tree on the cliff, however, is weathered and beaten. It could not grow straight, but was twisted by the buffeting of the wind as it grew. The weathered tree spiraled as she grew upward, unlike the straight trees below. Once she was struck by lightning, which charred a side of her and tore her original upward-reaching arms. Though she suffered injuries which would kill most trees, she miraculously returned to life, bearing a dark scar from the lightning on her side and injuries to her upreaching arms. Year after year, the trees all grew. In the valley, trees reached heights over 300 feet, while the weathered tree fought for more root space in the granite in which she was planted. Her height was stunted as her energy was spent in the struggle for root space and her lack of available water. She was twisted so that her height was further limited by the turns her difficult life had taken. The forest trees below mocked the weathered tree. They lived in companionship with each other, strong and straight. The solitary tree above had her head. The solitary tree above had her shameful twisted body on display for all the other trees to see and mock. It was right to have this torture tree kept apart from the rest, they said, for she would never fit in with our beautiful forest below. The years came and went, and while the weathered tree continued her difficult existence, the forest enjoyed their pleasantries. Deer and elk lived in the forest. Ferns grew in their moist shade. There was harmony in the forest which went beyond the trees alone. The forest was proud. Beside the weathered tree, nothing grew. Even the granite outcropping was bare of moss or lichen. No deer ever came up to enjoy her shade. Her place was so harsh, not even wasps came to build a nest on her branches. She was solitary and rejected. The forests of the Sawtooth Mountains are harvested by more than one lumber company. The time came when this part of the forest was set for the harvest. Men came and cut all the tall, straight trees below and took them away. However, the twisted, weathered tree was not touched. She was too precarious a place for the men to climb. Her trunk was too dangerous to cut because she would not fall straight. A man could be injured or die trying to cut down such a tree. The tree wasn't straight enough to send to the lumber mill. Nothing could be made of her wood, for her shape was too distorted for any of the purposes men use such trees. As they cut the trees below, the forest was so dense, as one tree fell, it would strike against another and break away the branches of both. Once on the ground, the men would quickly trim all the remaining branches from the trunk. Then the trunk would be dragged away, loaded, and removed from the forest. The shock and dismay of the trees as they fell was shared by the withered tree above. She looked down in wonder at this sudden end to all the pride, all the beauty, and all the life which had lived for so long below her. Only too late did the forest realize the withered tree alone would survive. Some of the last to fall called to her and said, "We're sorry. Please forgive us for how we treated you. I shall always remember your beauty and never recall anything which would diminish the memory of you all," she called back. She meant this, and felt great sorrow at the passing of her accusers. When the harvest ended, the withered tree looked down upon the fertile ground below, where only the stumps of the forest remained. It was now a solitary scene. The lone tree missed its beautiful companions. While they had been unable to see themselves, she had been able to see them all. They had indeed been beautiful. Perhaps she had been the subject of their scorn because she was all they could see. Maybe if they could have seen themselves as I saw them, she thought, they would have felt more joy. Maybe they never realized their own beauty. Had they seen themselves as I saw them, I believe they would have been happier. The men never leave a cut forest without planting seedlings. Therefore, they returned and restocked the barren ground with new replacement life. However, seedlings raised by men are unprepared to survive without care, and in this valley there was no one to care for them. The hungry deer who still remained ate most of the seedlings. The remainder struggled and died, disoriented on the floor of the valley. For a time, it seemed the valley was destined never to become a forest again. The withered tree looked down as these events unfolded before her. Then she took heart. Her despair turned to hope as she shed her pine cones off the cliff to bounce to the ground below. From her height, the drop would send her seeds bouncing to even the farthest reach of the valley below. Unlike the seedlings planted by men, these seeds were from a parent whose life was difficult and whose daily struggle had tempered her with a resolve unlike the life force of a domestic plant. These seeds bore in them the determination of a strong parent. They sprouted and grew full of life and vigor. Months turned to years, and a small forest grew again below. As the forest grew, the withered tree watched with joy as her family increased. This new forest, unlike the old, knew they were indebted to the withered tree. They knew she was their mother. Where before the forest had mocked her, this new one prized her. They knew from her height she could see farther than any of them below. Tell us of the coming clouds, they would ask, and she would warn them of things to come before they arrived. The forest grew in height and beauty, and the withered tree counseled and taught them as they did. She told them of their beauty. She told them how they looked from above. Although they could not see themselves as she did, they understood who they were because of her. They called her our great mother, and she called them children. The withered tree remains there today. She's crooked, windswept, scarred, and standing alone on a granite cliff. But her life's sufferings and many injuries have made her wise, and her children regard her as the greatest beauty in the forest. It does not matter she stands alone, for she lives in harmony with her family. Because of them she is never alone. Because of her, they are never without hope.